Welcome, everybody. This is Fantasy Football's Finest. I'm joined once again by the commish, Matt Cortina. How you doing,
Hey,
Matt?
Mike.
And we are also joined by one of our fellow members, Ted Moore. How you doing, Ted?
Pretty good. Thanks for having me, guys.
Hey, great to have you here. This is nice to have a little three-way action.
We have 6 of the last 10 league champions in this
That's
Zoom
true.
conference.
Heavy hitters right here.
It's a brain trust, is what it is.
It is. It is.
It's like the Tom Brady and Peyton Mannings of the AFC.
That's right. Yeah.
I'll be Ben Roethlisberger.
That works. So today we're going to be going over each division and kind of seeing where they stand heading into the 2020 season. So we're going to start off with the AFC North, and we'll kick it off with the Baltimore Ravens, who I thought had one of the best drafts, maybe number 2 next to the Dallas Cowboys. But, I mean, their draft was just awesome. Whatever the GM's name is, he has just done a fantastic job up there. They get a solid middle linebacker. They get another defensive tackle that can sit behind Calais Campbell and learn. They added speed at wide receiver. I don't know how these guys don't win the AFC North again.
Well, the Ravens always draft extremely well. And they bring in the right kind of guys, as we were talking about on a previous video, Mike. They brought in Derek Wolfe, who might be a diamond in the rough even at 30 years old or whatever he is. But you also have to give, because of that, extra credence to every selection that they make because they hit so often. The Ravens had the draft that I wish the Packers had. Almost
At least you admit it now.
Yeah, almost every single pick. Patrick Queen, I know Lamar Jackson called him Ray Lewis Jr., probably not, but he's still like a defensive superstar that you can build around. He was the 2nd ranked or 3rd ranked linebacker in the draft class, but he could easily, we'll see how he plays in the pros. And then you get, another top guy at his position, J.K. Dobbins, and you just go down the list. Devin Duvernay is a speedster. I mean, that he can immediately contribute. Justin Matabuki, he can contribute on the defensive line. They built that their draft around not necessarily need, but the best player available. And so it shows in just a variety of guys that are going to contribute to a team that went 13-3, 14-2 last year.
Yeah.
So I think they have the best draft of any team in the league.
Sure.
I'm sick and tired of the Baltimore Ravens and everything that they do, because the franchise is like made of solid steel. And anytime you're in a position where you can just take the best player available, like that, I mean, that is like the best place, the best way to approach a draft. And you have to be kind of at that level. You have to at least be like a winning team. Otherwise you have glaring needs you need to address. And this is just goes, I mean, they don't, maybe edge rusher was one gap I've heard people say that they wish they had addressed, but like you can't hate on that team. They look great.
Yeah. I mean, when you bring in a guy like Calais Campbell, I mean, they're running a 3-4 defense, so he's going to play that defensive end, like that 3 technique. But Calais Campbell was playing like a 4-3 defensive end in Jacksonville. He played a little bit of that in Arizona when he was there, so he can rush the passer. I don't think they're going to have any problem, especially when you have guys, like that secondary. A strong secondary helps out a weak pass rush for sure. Yeah. So when you have Marlon Humphrey, Marcus Peters, Jimmy Smith, who's also there, Earl Thomas, I mean, those guys can cover for days. Whoever they put that's rushing the passer is definitely going to hit home on that defense.
I don't know how much you guys pay respect to like Mel Kiper and I don't want to sound like a dummy by just saying just because his picks were or like following his draft board or whatever. But every single time a guy was like lingering on Mel Kiper's top picks, the Ravens took him like 4 rounds later, which probably has to say something. I don't know.
Like auto draft to me.
Yeah, it sounds like they auto drafted.
I mean, that's really.
I mean,
what
Adam
it is.
did win the championship last year on an auto draft.
There's something to it.
Yeah. To be fair, it was each one of us voting on each pick before we selected it. So, if anything,
wisdom of crowds, baby.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, it's good drafting because they're not doing anything stupid. They're not reaching for anyone that they shouldn't be. I mean, these players are essentially falling to them. The Packers traded up at 26 to take Jordan Love, which we can talk about in another segment. But what that pick should have been, it should have been Patrick Queen. Instead, Patrick Queen ends up falling to 28, I believe, is where the Ravens selected, which, boom, they have to take that guy because it fills an immediate need and he's a talent. Same thing with J.K. Dobbins. I mean, he's just sitting there in the second round, so why not have a stable of running backs to pair with, Lamar Jackson?
There was talk all year that J.K. Dobbins was going to be the top running back taken. And obviously, like, teams pick for their own scheme, but there's no saying that J.K. Dobbins can't be the next great running back in the league, and he just fell to them. The other thing is that the Ravens are picking late in the draft. To have this high a quality of a draft when you're picking close to 30 is insane.
It's remarkable. Having Marshall Yanda retire was going to hurt them a lot. They drafted Ben Bredesen, who I think is a pretty good offensive guard. He'll fit a need. Their offensive line is just solid.
Yeah.
Like, they're going to run the ball over everyone, and play action is going to devastate the entire AFC with those guys.
Solid team.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, so moving on to everyone's favorite team, the Cincinnati Bengals, who had the first overall draft pick. Of course, they took Joe Burrow, and today we just found out that they let go of Andy Dalton. There are no backup quarterbacks currently on their roster, but outside of that, they had a pretty good draft. They signed a lot of guys via free agency, basically remade their entire secondary. They have a chance to compete here, especially if Joe Burrow's the real deal. And drafting T. Higgins and John Ross comes back healthy. Oof, those guys could put up some points.
Yeah, and AJ Green, whatever happens to him.
Yeah.
And they lost Eifert this year, right?
Yeah, Eifert's in Jacksonville.
Yeah. But still, I mean, enough weapons for a rookie quarterback. It's just going to come down to how quickly he can adapt to the NFL. And I don't know, you could argue whether keeping Dalton or not on that team would have helped his development, if it would have been worth the cost of keeping him. But Joe Burrow was the obvious choice at one. There was no other move to make, and there was, talk about, what it would cost for them to trade out of it. But if you think that Joe Burrow, who came off the greatest college season of all time, is going to project well into the pros, then then there's no cost, or there's no price that's worth trading out of that. And then you had T. Higgins, who people thought might go, he might be the third receiver off the board, and he fell, and they took him there. And then their third round pick, Logan Wilson, was a guy that they talk about a lot out here in Colorado because he played at Wyoming. And he can do a lot of things from an inside linebacker position. I know there are a lot of people out here who hoping he would go to the Broncos because that's a position of need for them. But so, I mean, it was, only 7 picks, but they got the most important piece in Joe Burrow. And T. Higgins may not contribute right away, but he just adds to like a pretty stacked receiver room.
Yeah, for sure. Yep.
The Bengals are loaded with talent to a point that I can't remember them having in recent history. It's been a couple decades, really, since they have anything to really be excited about. Joe Burrow seems like the guy. I mean, I only know him statistically from last year. I didn't get to watch too many of his games, but like he seems like he's like feeling like being the guy they need him to be. He's being the Ohio kid. He's like saying all the right things. I think he'll focus. I do wonder who will be their backup, which is now a somewhat intriguing open item, actually, because like we said earlier, like maybe Dalton would have been good to learn under, but maybe not worth the price tag. But who do you bring in at this point? Because I think that'll have an impact, and you have to have a backup quarterback, and you probably want someone who's got some experience under them. I don't think you can just pair him with another young kid without a whole lot of experience. Either way, I don't expect the Bengals to get more than 5 wins.
Yeah,
but I mean,
they need some time to gel for sure.
Yeah,
I mean, the Dolphins had 5 or 6 wins last year,
5,
and they're in remarkably better shape than they were last year. And you saw a lot of fight out of that team. You didn't see any of that out of the Bengals, but with all this infusion of talent, and we'll find out with all that talent what kind of a coach Zach Taylor is.
Yep.
And what he has the perfect prototype in Joe Burrow to mold, I would guess, whatever kind of offense, whatever kind of pro style offense he wants. So I think it's going to say a lot about him. It puts a lot of pressure on the coach.
Yeah, they'll probably do like a run and shoot. I mean, with the receivers that they got there right now, plus that stable of running backs, I mean, that offense is going to be pretty good. The only thing they're lacking a little bit is maybe a little bit on the interior of the offensive line, as far as their offense goes, and tight end, a little bit of a hole. But
Yeah.
I think they'll be okay.
What inexpensive middling veteran quarterback presences are there still available left to sign?
Ooh. Well, I mean, at this point, you can't bring in Cam Newton. He's out. You want a guy that's been kind of a journeyman. Good backup quarterbacks, what people don't realize is backup quarterbacks are actually like a second coach to the starting quarterback. They're helping them prepare for game day. They're going over game film, all the plays, everything like that, the install. So he needs like that veteran type to help him learn how to prep for game day. Not saying that he doesn't know how to do it, but pros is a little bit different than college. So he needs that type of veteran leadership behind him. I don't think you can bring in someone that's too young or too much that's used to being a starter as well.
I got it. Andy Dalton.
I heard he's available.
Nailed it. I mean, that also could be the play. Like, what if they just didn't want to pay his salary, so they release him, bring him back in on a cheaper contract? I mean, teams have done that before.
Yeah, if nobody signs him, why not?
Yeah. So, Bengals are looking good. So, Ted, you said you had them at 5 wins?
Yeah, just rookie quarterbacks, and they don't have a legacy of winning. There wasn't a whole lot to work with. Yeah, their offense has a lot of pieces. Does their defense live up to it?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. But I don't know. I just keep seeing quarterbacks get drafted high, and their teams are always still just like double-digit losses. So
yeah.
Going with history here.
I like 5 wins. I think 6 is probably pushing it, especially given the division that they're in. There's so much veteran coaching that's going on there. And all these teams are fairly loaded with talent. We talk about the Browns next. They are who they are, but on paper, these guys should be winning the Super Bowl almost every year. When you look at this offensive talent, they have 2 Pro Bowl caliber at tight ends now. You have 2 Pro Bowl caliber wide receivers. You have a young, talented quarterback in Baker Mayfield. You have 2 Pro Bowl running backs. Your offensive line has been completely rebuilt. You signed Jack Conklin from Tennessee to play right tackle. You drafted Jedrick Wills to play left tackle in the first round. If these guys end up with a crappy season again, they just got to do something. I mean, even their defense, the weakest spot on their defense is all of their linebackers. They have no legitimate linebacker. They're strong in the secondary as far as talent goes, and their defensive line may rival some of the best. Myles Garrett, Sheldon Richardson, they signed in the offseason as well. So guys are insane.
Yeah, and they lost Schober and Kirksey. So they have maybe they have something in the pipeline. I don't know. I mean, it comes down to Baker Mayfield for the Browns, and I wasn't sold on him coming out of Oklahoma, and I think that there was a lot of optimism because he had decent moments in his first year, and you hadn't seen that out of a Browns quarterback in a long time. And then they bring in Odell Beckham, and they traded for Jarvis Landry that year too. So all of a sudden you have these weapons around, and everybody just kind of like put 2 and 2 together before 2 and 2 had actually been put together, and made some assumptions about how good that team was going to be. But it ultimately comes down to Baker Mayfield. And if he doesn't have a Pro Bowl type season, then you're going to have to start looking for a new quarterback, because everything is in place and he's had enough time to learn the system and learn his receivers. And you know that with Odell Beckham, if that you don't give him the ball enough, or that if you're not playing well, then he's going to, melt down. And that's going to create some rifts. And you also have Myles Garrett, who hit a guy in the head with a helmet. So you have some testy guys on that team. And if you're not winning, I mean, all of this could just blow up again for the Browns, which really could happen, because you have the Steelers and Ravens, which are better teams right now.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I could see the Browns being a bit of a lightning rod, win or lose, just like that the personalities, I can see them also being equally cocky as they are, testy when they lose. Yeah. So that's another one where it's like the gelling really needs to happen. But it really does come down to Mayfield. They're loaded with talent. He has to take that step forward. Sophomore slump is a thing, I guess, if you don't have a good rookie season, or if you do have a good rookie season. So let's hope year 3 is better, because they need it.
Yep.
Yeah. Problem with the Browns is that they always make terrible decisions. First of all, hiring Hugh Jackson and letting him stay another year after that miserable first season, and then you bring all this talent in, and he just collapsed. He could not handle all the personalities. But to your point about Baker Mayfield, he does need to have a good season. But what they have now, which they didn't have last season, is insurance. Kevin Stefanski brought over his guy, Case Keenum, signed him on a 3-year contract. So he's saying, hey, Baker, if you can't get the job done, your ass is sitting on the bench, and we're going with Case Keenum, who, no, I mean, what was that season? The Minnesota Vikings ended up going 12-4 with him at quarterback?
Yeah, I think they went 14-2, and they were the first seed. Yeah, I mean, that's a whole nother element. Is Stefanski the right guy? Because outside of that 1 year, there's a lot of questions about how good he really is. And then last year, it's Gary Kubiak's offense. It's a totally different system in Minnesota that he wasn't running. But I don't know. It seemed like he had a good relationship with Keenum, and Keenum goes to Denver and then Washington and doesn't play well. So maybe it's all relationship based. If he creates a good relationship with Mayfield, then maybe it could work out for them. Or, as you said, just plug in Keenum.
Yeah, Keenum is the guy that the Bengals needed.
That's right.
They needed that. That's who I was thinking of.
Yeah. That's probably why they made a play for that instead, just because there's not too many veteran quarterbacks. Like, I could probably pull it up, but I don't think there's a lot of guys left on the market who would fill that kind of role. All right, so done with the Browns.
The 3-year contract's pretty long. They really are thinking. Sorry.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I mean,
I'm
pretty sure he's getting like $15 million a year too, if I'm not mistaken.
So that's genuine. Like, you could step in. Yeah.
Yeah. That's definitely insurance on Baker Mayfield. So we'll see how that plays out. I mean, the Browns, they could end up winning 14 games with this roster, but they could also end up winning 5 or 6. Yep. So who knows with them.
Yep.
All right. So one of the reasons that we have Ted here today is he is our regional Steelers fan. So Ted, why don't you kick off the Steelers? How do you feel that they did in the draft?
Well, if you include all of the reasons they didn't have a lot of draft capital, then I still say A+. I mean, Devin Bush and Minkah Fitzpatrick are two of the most important players and two of the most talented defenders I've seen walk onto the field in recent years, like on the ilk of like Shazier and Palomalu, to like put it over the top, or just like game changers. They just like know how to be where the ball is and like know how to make the play and smell it out. And it's awesome to watch. So on that end, like, love it. And I mean, those guys are young. I don't feel bad about not having a first-round draft pick or much draft capital at all this year, because those guys are worth it. On the outside of that, I think they made the best with what they had. I really like the pick for of Claypool, Chase Claypool. It's that big target they need.
Mexico.
Yeah, right. He's like, I mean, it's Martavis Bryant. Like, it's like Ben will find this guy, and like that much is already set. I mean, there's, I guess, some scuttlebutt that they might like put 15 pounds on him and have him play tight end. But from what I hear, he's kind of like an effort player. He played special teams all through college because he liked it. He likes to tackle. He likes to hit. He likes to block. So like, he's kind of that, like a larger Hines Ward almost, and like you can get a lot of mileage out of a receiver that likes to block. So I'm all in with what they did. And then they filled in a lot of other like smaller needs. They've got an offensive guard to kind of bring a little youth to the lineup, and a fast running back. The Anthony McFarland is more of a quickster who we don't really have a whole lot of speed. So
very good pass catcher too.
Good.
And there's concerns about James Conner's health, obviously.
Yeah. That makes sense. I mean, I love what the Steelers did last year, and you really kind of started seeing it like mid-season, where the Steelers became the Steelers that we all know. I mean, these guys have always been known for their defense. You think back to the Steel Curtain days, even the 90s and the early 2000s. Like, these guys always, and even in the later 2000s, they always had a defense. But over the last couple of years, they kind of lacked in that department. but they finally put it all together. I mean, their linebacking core, like you said, Devin Bush, I mean, that guy can run. He can cover against the pass. He can probably run a 4.40. I'm pretty sure he ran at the combine. But you pair him with Bud Dupree, who they franchise tagged, and then TJ Watt, who we all know who he is. You got Cameron Hayward, Stephon Tuitt on the defensive line. Like, these guys are all pros. And then when you have a guy like Minkah Fitzpatrick, who was well worth a first-round draft pick last year, I probably would have given up a 1 and maybe a 3 if I knew he was going to get 5 or 6 interceptions, whatever he ended up with. And then Terrell Edmonds, young safety that they drafted last year. I mean, these guys, you have veteran leadership at the cornerback position with Joe Hayden, Steve Nelson. So that defense is going to be good. If Ben comes back motivated and healthy, especially having a guy like Claypool, because we found out last year that Juju, he's not the guy.
Yeah.
I mean, granted, they had quarterback issues, but they rolled coverage to him, and he had a hard time separating double coverage.
And by extension, neither is James Washington. Like, I think everybody was expecting him to be Antonio Brown, and he's a decent player, but he's just not like the game-changing. He shows flashes, which I think got everybody excited, but he's just not the game-changing player that we thought he would be. It's crazy how quickly the Steelers remade their defense with just like bona fide stars, like all of them, and they're all so young. And you wonder why Miami wouldn't want to build around Minkah Fitzpatrick. I mean, they spent 8 of their 10 picks or something on defense. So if you're going to do that, if you're going to invest in the defense, just invest in Fitzpatrick, because he made an immediate difference for the Steelers. And the other thing is that, like, the Steelers were a game away from the playoffs based almost entirely on their defense, which was surprising a lot of people with how tough they were. And they were playing with a second and third string quarterback for the entirety of the season and 1 wide receiver, basically. Yeah. And without James Conner for a large spell of that time too. So if you put all of that together, you get everybody healthy, you get Big Ben back in, who's probably a Hall of Famer. I mean, the ceiling is the limit for the Steelers this year. It's crazy.
I think one of the undervalued, I guess, free agent signings that no one's really talking about is Eric Ebron going there.
Yep.
They now have a legitimate athletic tight end who is, I mean, Ebron is a red zone threat. I think he proved that 2 years ago in Indianapolis. That's going to be huge. So now you have a guy like Claypool, Ebron, and Juju. Oof. It's going to be tough to stop those guys.
Yeah, Claypool's great. He, just look at his testing numbers. We mentioned it before, but he's the only receiver to have that amount of size and run as fast as
I think he ran as
Calvin Johnson. And there's no saying that he's going to be Calvin Johnson, who's a once-in-a-generation talent. But the Steelers know how to draft wide receivers. I mean, you talk about the Ravens being a great drafting team. The Steelers have historically been fantastic wide receiver drafters. And Claypool has all the metrics that you want in a wide receiver, so they can probably mold them into their image. And then having Big Ben back after a year of rest with his big arm, and it could be pretty exciting.
Yeah.
And another fun signing is the Chris Wormley coming in. I know it's kind of at the expense of Vernon Hargrave, which is sort of like a 1-to-1 swap, but it's nice to sort of like have that body to be in the middle to plug up the run. I think that he's like another unsung free agent signing that I'm just like, yeah, like that was a possible gap, knowing that we were going to lose a young star in free agency. So we sort of just replaced him with somebody else who I think could be functional. So
yeah. Yep. All right. So now that we've kind of gone over like each of the teams in the AFC North, one of the things that this division is known for is running the ball and playing defense. Ted, you wanted to talk a little bit about the running backs in this division.
Yeah. In particular, to give us a talking point that I feel like is a little unsung right now is what's going on with running backs. Not a whole lot of infusion going on there. Players are getting released. Gurley's getting released. Like, there's not a whole lot of market for him. And we were kind of discussing at the draft, actually, like, will that change the way we look at the position? Are they going to come out earlier? Are they going to figure out a way to restructure these contracts or something? But yeah, I wanted to like just sort of like quickly go through and rank them in each of these divisions, just like the running back room in general. So I'll throw out what I've got, and I'll have you guys pick it apart at your leisure. So in the AFC, I'll start with number 4. The blue ribbon for number 4 is the Pittsburgh Steelers. You can't make an argument that their running back room is better than any of the others. Connor's a question mark. they like Snell, but he hasn't like shown it yet. And then their draft pick Anthony McFarland is like a speedster, doesn't have a whole lot of size. They kind of had it in that guy Kareth White. Don't talk to me about Jalen Samuels. Like they're hands down the worst in the division. Any argument?
Yeah, they do have a good good fullback though. I will say Derek Watt is he's a utility type fullback, more of that H-back position. I think that's definitely a good add for them. It'll help them in the run and the pass for sure.
That's a good point.
Yeah, definitely.
I wonder what they're going to do with James Conner and what kind of year he's going to have this year, because they're going to have to make a decision on him in the near future. He has shown flashes, and he's actually shown prolonged stretches of a few games where he can be dominant, but his health is a consideration. And I don't think that you take a running back, within the first 4 picks if you're feeling necessarily confident about the depth of your starting running back and then of your running room.
Yeah. One thing that I say will definitely help him. I didn't watch a whole lot of tape of the Pittsburgh Steelers, so maybe Teddy, you can better explain this, but with Ben being out and with no Antonio Brown, you're getting 8-man boxes every day.
Yeah.
And especially like there was that stretch of games where Pouncey was out for 3 games. I want to say there was another offensive lineman that got suspended 1 game because of that whole Browns incident.
Well, James Conner is a real big keeper candidate for me, so I think that I'm hoping for the best out of him.
All right, we'll see. Who you got at 3, Ted?
So 3, and this was tough. This is a very close to a 2A, 2B, so I'm going to throw them both out, which will give away number 1, 2. But at 3, the Baltimore Ravens. Their running game was the best, but it was a lot of Lamar Jackson, and this is about like the running back room. I like Mark Ingram, but he's a little bit old now compared to like the leaders in the clubhouse and the other 2 teams. I don't know much about J.K. Dobbins, but he elevates the room a little bit. It just sort of looks like a mishmash of they run the ball well, but I don't love their running backs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mark Ingram, he's definitely talented. Seeing him last year in the true workhorse role, I thought he did very well. But if there was a standard, drop back pocket passer, I don't know if he would have had the season that he had. So, having the threat of Lamar Jackson there definitely increases his value and his statistics. The J.K. Dobbins is pure speculation. We don't know what he's actually going to do in the NFL, but having a guy like that there has a lot of potential to, next year we could be having this conversation, and that's the number 1 running back group.
I would say that Dobbins is going to make a move to the front of the depth chart at some point. That being said, I think Mark Ingram, even before he played it down for the Ravens, was one of the smartest signings because he was such a strong contributor in New Orleans, and he was so undervalued in free agency that it just seemed like a steal for the Ravens to get him. The other thing you have to consider with the Ravens is that they totally revamped their offense to a system that surprised a lot of people and that people haven't seen before. So you almost have to evaluate the running backs based on that system. I guess that's counter to your point, Teddy. You have to consider the system and the players around them when you consider the quality of those running backs, because they built that scheme around the players that they have to maximize their talents and to present something on the field that people haven't really seen before. The other thing about the Ravens is that they have 4 guys who have gotten serious carries in the league with both Gus Edwards and Justice Hill. Not that those guys are particularly great, but you saw moments out of Gus Edwards certainly 2 years ago. Towards the end of the year prior, he had enough so that people were considering him when they were drafting fantasy teams if he's going to be the next guy instead of Mark Ingram. So the depth, I think, is a consideration to the quality of that overall room.
Yeah,
definitely.
Also, I would probably put them at number 2 with what I'm looking at, and this is probably going to be a ongoing theme with me. I love fullbacks, and Patrick Ricard, he is a very good fullback. I think the Browns have a better fullback, which they just got this year in free agency, but all these teams, they employ I'm not too sure about the Bengals, but these 3 teams that we're talking about here, the Browns, the Steelers, and the Ravens, all have very good fullbacks and use them as well.
Yep. So the 2A then I have as the Bengals. I think Joe Mixon took a big step forward. and he's got youth on his side. They still have Gio Bernard, right? Like that guy is like won't lay down.
Yeah.
And like, and that's like it's Joe Mixon being like that potential, which we haven't. J.K. Dobbins hasn't proven that he's got it. Mark Ingram, like, it's just a sort of like we know what we're going to get out of him. He adds like a level of explosiveness, and I love the change of pace with Gio. He's like an old standard. But to all of your points, like they're 2A, 2B. Like you can make a good argument with the depth and the system. All of that matters. So, but that which brings us to the Cleveland Browns. I mean, Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, like.
Yeah.
Last year that looked good, knowing that Kareem Hunt was going to miss half the season, and like no one's talking about that. They're both in the whole time now.
Yeah,
that's like Mike mentioned earlier, 2 Pro Bowl, like they're like all like borderline all pro players.
Right.
Yeah, for
Plus,
sure.
to Mike's point, they bring in Andy Janovich from Denver, who's a fantastic fullback too.
Yeah.
So then, if we consider the quarterback play for Joe Mixon last year impacting whatever his potential was, if we consider the quarterback play in Pittsburgh impacting whatever James Conner, was, then you have to consider the whole team in Cleveland too. And there's just so many weapons, 2 tight ends, 2 wide receivers that are all pros, Pro Bowl caliber players. There's just so much talent on that team. It's going to open so many opportunities for them to run the ball. And you just hope that Stefanski is creative enough to use both of those guys and all of those guys at the same time to take some of that burden off Baker Mayfield so that it's not all on him.
Mm-hmm. The one thing I love about the Browns and the Bengals running back rooms is they have guys who do different things really well. Joe Mixon, he's a runner. He can also catch the ball really well. But Giovanni Bernard, excellent pass catcher, also really good in pass protection. On third downs, which is where he sees most of his work. Same thing with Kareem Hunt. Excellent third down, knows blitz pickups, and he's probably a better pass catcher than he is a running back. I mean, that's kind of why they brought him in there to pair with Chubb. But you have guys like the Baltimore Ravens. They just run the football. I mean, Mark Ingram has pretty good catching ability, but for the most part, they're all doing the same thing. Just big, bruising guys just running up the middle. So you need a lot of versatility in that room, and that's what I like about the Browns and the Bengals running back rooms.
No, that's a fair point. I still think they both suck, but it's a good running back room.
Maybe having a good running back room is the opposite of what you need to have a good season.
Yeah. Well, so what do you guys project for the AFC North this year? What are your projections for how they finish?
Well, I think Baltimore takes the division again. I think between that defense and the way that their offense performed last year, now it is a copycat league. They could just take whatever Tennessee did. And I mean, Greg Roman's offense in years past has always seen this kind of, hey, look, this is the most amazing offense ever. You saw it with Kaepernick. You saw it up in Buffalo a little bit with Tyrod Taylor. And then the next year it all just kind of falls apart because someone figures out how to stop him. And he doesn't really change his way until something new comes along. But the defense, the running game, reigning MVP, I still like the Baltimore Ravens. I think the Pittsburgh Steelers get a wild card. They finish second in there, and then
there was an extra one this year.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So, I mean, you could see 3 teams out of this, potentially, if the Browns actually put it all together, which I don't know if they do, but Bengals at the bottom.
Yeah, I like I think the foundations of Pittsburgh's defense is going to take them really far. And having seen that Ravens offense for a year, yeah, they were creative last year, but it really took everybody by surprise. And the NFL is not for long. People pick up on things really quickly. You look at what happened to the Rams. Yeah, they had some salary cap issues, but not necessarily last year. They had a lot of the same talent, and they totally fell off. So I think, and Big Ben's going to come back hungry. So I think it's going to be a really close division. I like the Steelers to win it, followed by the Ravens closely. And they could both be teams that have more than 10 wins, probably followed by the Browns and then the Bengals.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, with it, I have to stick with history. I have to believe like what I've seen, and it's always the Ravens and the Steelers toe to toe. The Ravens, I was more confident in the Steelers taking the division a month ago, like pre-draft. I mean, the Ravens did a lot of good work, filled in a lot of needs. So, but as the Steelers apologist, I'm going to say that they're going to edge them out. I think that the Ravens, I mean, they can't get 14 wins and have the Steelers win, but I think that they're bound, even if they win the division, to not go 14-2. I'm thinking like maybe a solid 11-5, which is usually the record Super Bowl champions win or have at the end of the year. But I'm going to have to go, Steelers, Ravens, Browns, Bengals, like it is every year.
Regardless of who actually finishes where, I think there's probably about 3 divisions in the NFL that really matter in 2020. I think the AFC North is one of them. AFC West is going to be another one. And I think the NFC South is going to be another one that people are just talking about, not just because of Brady, but because of the quarterback play that they have down there. But AFC North is going to be a fun one to watch, as it always is. And now you're seeing a lot of those teams kind of rebuild their big defenses and powerful running games like the days of old.
Yep.
Yeah.
We'll see if there is a season.
Yeah.
Don't say that, Matt. Don't say that. There's not enough alcohol in the world to get through that.
To get through
Sundays.
the football season.
Yeah.
We'll simulate it on Madden.
Perfect.
And
Perfect.
we'll just watch it all together.
Fantasy football's finest Madden league.
I feel like we should watch like 1991 or something.
Yeah.
Like just like some throwback year.
Yeah.
We should definitely do that. All right, so that's going to wrap up our AFC North breakdown and what we think going into the 2020 season. Ted, I want to thank you for joining us, and Matt, it's a pleasure as always.
My pleasure. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.